Hello again, everyone. I'm Gareth. This is Somewhere on Earth, and where we are, it is Tuesday, the 28th of November, 2023, and we are in London with guests from the United States, Jamaica, and Amsterdam. And keeping us company today is tech journalist Issy Lepowski. Issy, good to see you again. It's been a few weeks. How are you?
Good. Great to be here again.
Excellent. So just before we jump into the main part of the show, let's just go through this article you've just written for Fast Company about internet shutdowns in Gaza, a grim situation over there, and the internet access and mobile broadband not great at all. Just pick us up on a few of the themes that came out in your article.
This story is really about the long history of internet access in the Gaza Strip, which has been obviously under extreme duress since October 7th in the midst of this, just onslaught of bombings. Obviously has had a massive impact on internet infrastructure in Gaza. But the important thing to know is that while there are lots of internet service providers in Gaza, all of that service and access relies on Israeli infrastructure. So even long before this particular war, Palestinians have really been reliant on Israel for access to their internet, access to mobile phones. They rely on Israel's electromagnetic sphere, on Israel's fiber internet cables. And so internet access has always been somewhat suppressed in Gaza. And Palestinians in the Gaza Strip have access to about 2G. That's, 50% slower than a lot of us in the rest of the world. And even in Israel, live with. And so the story was really about how Israel has kind of always had its thumb on internet access in the Gaza Strip. And so during the course of this war has been able to, kind of use that as another weapon. It's not just the aerial bombings that have taken out some of this infrastructure, but, the internet service providers in the Gaza Strip that remain are saying, we have experienced actual physical shutdowns by the Israeli government where, the internet goes out and we don't make any repairs. And then all of a sudden it comes back again. In addition to that, they've faced fuel shortages, which have meant that they can no longer run the generators to run their data centers, to run the internet. So Palestinians, in addition to the, chaos that they're experiencing day in, day out since the beginning of this war, have that chaos has been exacerbated by, being plunged into virtual darkness, essentially, unable to communicate not just with the outside world, but with, rescue teams, with family members, with, all of the lifelines that, would help them navigate access to food, access to water, access to health. So it really was about how something as simple as internet access can make such a dire situation in the Gaza Strip that much worse.
But some on the Israel side of things might say, well, Israel's justified concern, given what happened on October the 7th, is Hamas using the networks to plan terrorist attacks. And then indeed, look what happened a few weeks ago. That proves the point.
That has always been the concern, is that Israel says that any equipment that gets moved into Gaza, which they have control over, could be used for dual use purposes. And that means it could be used by civilians and it could be used by terrorist groups to carry out terrorist attacks, exactly like, as you said, much like the one we saw on October 7th. And so that is what has really complicated the geopolitical environment for, addressing this problem, right? Like in Ukraine, we saw Elon Musk step in right away with Starlink satellite internet access. And, there have been certainly controversies surrounding that with regard to, Elon Musk's willingness to enact that service in Russian-controlled Crimea, but still he was very quick to bring that service to Ukraine. Gaza is a very different place. It's much smaller than Ukraine. So in, the best of times, even the commercial market for a satellite provider is not as big as it would be in Ukraine. And in the worst of times, it's a much trickier humanitarian landscape. Just this week, Elon Musk is in Israel, because he had announced that he wanted to bring Starlink to Gaza, and the Israeli Ministry of Communications said, absolutely not. We will do everything in our power to stop this. So he's now in Israel, where he's agreed to, if there's going to be any deployment of Starlink satellite, Israel gets to have the final say, and that includes in the Gaza Strip.
And just a brief one on this, then some groups, of course, have been calling now for a digital ceasefire, and probably underpinning that might be an argument that no authority, whatever the circumstances, has the right to disconnect an entire population, saying that internet access in itself is a human right, or at the very least, it is the means through which people have access to all the other human rights. So, yeah, it calls for a digital ceasefire.
Exactly.
Some.
And this has been sort of a growing movement. I believe it was 2016. The United Nations issued a resolution basically condemning internet shutdowns, which are used as tools of war and tools of suppression throughout the world, not just in Gaza. And so there has been a real movement to recognize that internet access is a human right, like all of these other human rights. And even in the context of war, depriving people of that human right is not okay.
All right, Issy, thank you very much indeed for that. Plenty more from you as we go along. And also coming up in the show. Yes, in today's bumper edition, we'll hear some of your thoughts and comments. And you're bound to have a few thoughts on this, by the way. Internet search is becoming AI-powered. Now, you know how we can just type a question in these days rather than just some keywords like we did back in the days of 486 PCs and Windows XP? Well, guess what? AI-assisted search is up to 20 times as energy-intensive as regular search. Add all that up, and you end up with power consumption figures that may make you feel a bit queasy. Put it that way. In happier news, though, we do have a money-making tip for you and your data. That's all right here on the Somewhere on Earth podcast. Well, first then, that story about search and a load of other stuff we do online, of course, and search. It's all becoming ever more AI-powered. So we're asking, at what cost? That's because a new study says that AI could consume as much energy as a small country by 2027. And when you think about it, like every time you get ChatGPT to help you with, I don't know, say a college assignment, then there's some highly complex processing going on under the bonnet as a machine language and machine learning algorithm scours billions of words and images. It seeks out patterns in the data. And I'm kind of simplifying here, but then it pieces together a result that it then presents to you with some very powerful language modeling. Now, you might get your assignment within a fraction of a second, but it's taken a whole load of processing to get there, and that is really energy hungry. And now consider this, like Google search is becoming increasingly ChatGPT-like, so now when we type things like, how should I keep fit into Google search? Well, then we get those answers. And when you put in a whole sentence like that with a question mark on the end, that leads to AI-powered search, and that kind of search is up to 20 times as energy intensive as standard search. So to hear more and to be scared out of my wits even further, I've been speaking to Alex de Vries. He's recently authored a paper called The Growing Energy Footprint of Artificial Intelligence.
The thing with AI is that ultimately, the bigger, the better. So if you're making these models, the more data you put in, the more parameters you put in, the more robust the models become, and the more robust the models become, the better they perform. So that actually leads to people making really massive models, putting gigantic amounts of data just to create better models. If you somehow make these models more efficient, if you somehow make the hardware more efficient, you just give people a way to put in even more data. I think that is ultimately what makes AI so energy intensive, that you have this underlying dynamic where people are just constantly making bigger models requiring more computational resources and energy in the process.
And what kind of computational resources are we talking about? Because people might still be a bit baffled, saying, okay, we know that these are AI models, they're based on huge amounts of data, but how is that energy intensive?
The devices that are being used here are in a lot of cases very high-end, energy-hungry servers per every single device. And we're talking about hundreds of thousands of these devices being manufactured in the coming years, even exceeding the millions at some point. So obviously those numbers start adding up really quickly, especially as everyone is racing to build their own AI solutions. It's like we don't even care anymore what we're using AI for. We're just trying to put it into everything. And whatever we put it in, it doesn't matter. We need to make really big models to make it work. And ultimately, we need lots of computational resources, these really powerful servers that consume a lot of energy to make it happen.
But isn't the real figure that we should be talking about the energy use per user? And if you're talking about ChatGPT, I don't have any figures in front of me, but hundreds of thousands of people, millions may be using it at the same time. So when you divide that energy cost, but by everybody who's actually using it, it isn't that much, or is it?
Depends on how you look at it. For example, one of the things I considered was what happens if we turn Google search into something like ChatGPT today, given current available hardware and models. And if you would do that right now, so let's just assume that Google is capable of doing this, and let's assume that everyone that's currently using Google actually uses a ChatGPT-based Google. We're talking Google having 9 billion searches a day. If all those searches become ChatGPT-like interactions, then the energy intensity of those interactions would go up by a factor 10 to 20. So compared to a current Google search. And that's the result of putting AI into that interaction. So AI-powered Google search 10 to 20 times more energy intensive than a standard Google search at the moment. And then you can think about, okay, what are we talking about in terms of numbers? Because at the lowest level, one interaction, one Google search right now maybe consumes 0.3 watt hours. It's a little bit of an outdated figure, but probably still in the same range. And then if we talk about AI-powered Google search, what would be the energy consumption of such an interaction? Well, you're talking about 3 to 6 or maybe even a little bit more watt hours. Well, a lot of people won't realize what that means, but you're talking maybe about a low brightness LED that you let run for 1 hour, something that is comparable for that number. Let's say 3 to 6 watt hours. So it's not a lot per interaction, but then again, I mentioned we're talking about 9 billion of these interactions every single day. And for Google as a whole, their energy consumption just to power Google search in this way would have to be equivalent to a country like Ireland just to make it run. And
Wow.
the numbers really start to become very big and impressive.
Yeah, and this is because of AI-powered search then. This seems to be one of the big things that's jumping out from your research is that search and interactions online are becoming quite significantly more energy intensive when AI becomes involved.
Yeah, that's correct, yeah.
So what can we take from this then? Recommendations to policymakers, to the tech companies? Or is this just interesting stuff and hey, this is the energy cost of an AI-driven world?
Well, it could be, but the cost of AI could go up really rapidly. And that's what I showed in my research, that if we don't try to do anything about this at all, it could indeed be the case that in just a couple of years, we're talking about AI-related electricity consumption that's going to be equivalent to 0.5% of global electricity consumption, as much as my home country, the Netherlands, consumes in electricity every single year. And that's a substantial amount of power where we're going to get to in a time span of just 4 years, if you follow current projections on what is going to be produced in terms of servers. And well, that's a problem because ultimately, as we're raising our energy demand, it means that somewhere we're going to have to get the power to make it work. And that power is going to be sourced most likely from fossil fuels because our renewable energy capacity is going to be limited. We generally have limited renewable energy capacity. So if we're increasing our energy demand down the line somewhere, demand for fossil fuels is going to go up. And that is, of course, not great from a climate change perspective, where we have to reduce our carbon emissions and not increase our demand and increase our carbon emissions. So we're looking at a technology that actually can have a similar growth trajectory as cryptocurrency recently. This is the similarity between AI and cryptocurrencies between 2018 and right now. Bitcoin mining went from near zero to 0.5% of global electricity consumption already. Bitcoin mining already did that. And we're looking at AI probably doing something similar in the coming years. And it's just adding on top of the existing data center demand we already had. Data centers, before cryptocurrency mining appeared, data centers were already responsible for 1% of global electricity consumption. So then we have cryptocurrency mining coming in, adding 0.5%, which is 50% relative to the previous number for data centers. And now we see AI is going to be doing that again. So the data center segment is rapidly growing in terms of electricity consumption. We just don't have, like, from a global perspective, we really need to be reducing our energy demand. So maybe you could say that if we start putting AI into everything, then this is the cost, but we cannot bear those costs. We need to be very mindful about how we use our energy and not just blow up our energy demand, because we need to ultimately fight climate change.
Yeah. So ultimately a warning that the rise of AI is unsustainable. But isn't there potentially a good news story here? Because just good old economics tells us that if you're a data center, you're heavily incentivized now to make all of your processes more energy efficient. Isn't that the way it's going to go? Aren't your figures perhaps a little bit on the pessimistic side?
Yeah, well, that's the thing with AI. With regular data centers, you will be totally right. We have actually seen a significant increase in demand for digital products in the past decade. But between 2010 and 2018, data center power demand remained relatively flat because the energy efficiency of the devices that were being used was also increasing, and that was offsetting the increased demand for digital products. With AI, it doesn't work that way, simply because in the case of AI, you come up with more efficient hardware, more efficient models. But what you're doing is you're also lowering the cost of making the models even bigger. And then if companies have the opportunity to make the models even bigger, they will do it because a bigger model will perform better and probably bring in more revenues. So there's a bit of an incentive, not perfectly measurable, but there is a bit of an incentive to keep making these models bigger. And that offsets your efficiency gains. And you have to add that on top of the fact that the energy efficiency gains that we have been seeing in data centers are also decreasing. We're actually reaching the limits of Moore's law. So the efficiency gains aren't as big as they used to be, and that's not good news, especially if you now have this new technology that's going to be adding on top of all of it as well.
Wow, that is Alex de Vries. He's a data scientist at DNB Bank, and he's also a researcher at the VU Amsterdam. Technology journalist Issy Lepowski has been listening to that, and is it making you think again about that next time you do something on ChatGPT or do some AI-powered search, Issy?
It does, and I think it should make all of us think twice about this AI boom. I've been doing a lot of reporting on this myself, and it is, energy is one component of the problem. There's also a tremendous amount of water usage in data centers, and that can, really be a problem in already water constrained areas that happen to have a lot of data centers because they have a lot of solar energy. So that solves the energy problem, but not the water problem. And you have fights going on in local communities because they're saying, you're taking, acres upon acres upon acres of our land, draining our grid and our and our water resources. And for what? We're not getting a ton of jobs out of it. And we are kind of having to stare at these big ugly data centers instead of the natural land we used to have. So this is a problem that is playing out in communities across the U.S. and around the world, and I do think that it should make individuals, but more so companies that are racing to develop these AI-enabled products to think about the long tail of those business decisions.
Yeah, and I know that one of Alex's research interests is indeed that water usage that you mentioned. So now, one of the market leaders in AI hardware is the chip manufacturer NVIDIA. And they're mentioned quite prominently in Alex's paper, where he gave some pretty big figures about the server's energy consumption. So we've offered NVIDIA a right of reply, and they say accelerated computing on NVIDIA technology is the most energy efficient computing model for AI and other data center workloads. Our products are more performant and energy efficient with each new generation. Switching all the CPU-only servers running AI worldwide to GPU-accelerated systems could save 10 trillion watt-hours of energy a year, similar to the energy consumption of 1.4 million homes. So that's what NVIDIA say. And then Alex has reined back in because we just told him what we'd heard from the company there, and he says, well, yeah, but making AI more efficient doesn't just lower the cost of the model, it also lowers the cost of making the model even bigger, because bigger models performing better, well, there's certainly an incentive to do so. And I think what Alex means by that is that, yeah, sure, you can get efficiencies in all kinds of ways into your AI, but what you're most likely to do is kind of use the savings that you've got from those efficiencies to put into ever greater resources, so you kind of end up back where you were, but now you've got a bigger and better model that does more processing and presumably beats your competitors. So Alex continues, a crucial point of my article was that with AI efficiency gains are unlikely to be the answer to the growing AI-related electricity demand. So yeah, a little interesting exchange there between Alex and the chip manufacturer. So Issy, it does make you wonder what the solutions might be to this, whether they are technological, whether regulators can wade in, or if this really is a case of market forces, because so many of us find these services so convenient. We love the AI-powered tools that help with assignments and finding recipes and what have you. So I'm just sitting here just being Mr. Problem because I can't think of a way out of this.
There aren't many easy ways out, so I don't think you can put that all on yourself. I mean, I think there are some regulatory steps that can be taken. First of all, with regard to transparency, really understanding at a granular level how much energy and water consumption these companies data centers require. They publish some of that information in their sustainability reports, but there can always be a little bit of a sleight of hand, right? When they say that they're net zero carbon, that means that they're buying a whole bunch of offsets. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're not pulling any dirty energy from the grid when they need it. It just means they're offsetting it on the backside. So there's certainly transparency. There are other ways, I've spoken with researchers who talk about, ways that the industry might have to rethink its sort of always on all the time approach. There are ways to sort of maybe think about transferring more of their processing time to the times of day that there's actually more renewable energy and less when there's not, aka when the sun's not shining. So there are different, I think, regulatory steps. They would all be really tough pills for the industry to swallow. And so, I don't think that any of it is going to be easy, but certainly pressure on the industry, I think, will force them to innovate and adapt in ways that they have not yet been forced to.
Yeah, sure. So if the incentives change maybe from where they are at the moment, which is not, kind of a free-for-all in many ways, that he or she who has the most powerful AI is the one who gets the people going to their services. And I do wonder an element maybe of customer education. I mean, I don't know. I'll just be honest, how many people are going to listen to this and think, right, that's it, I'm not going to use any of these AI tools anymore. But even if there could be some browser add-on or some kind of plugin that tells you how much carbon each search has used, I don't know whether people people would choose to have something like that plugged in. And, I know that when you're booking a flight, for instance, it says, for a particular route, you've saved this much carbon. So it's like, hey, consumer, you're doing something really bad for the environment, but at least this flight here is a bit less bad for the environment than the other one you were going to book. And you do wonder how much notice consumers would really take.
Absolutely. But of course, to get any of that information, we need the data from the companies, right? So you have to take it step by step.
Absolutely.
But I do think, and sort of a reset in the business world, in the corporate world, there's been this push over the last year because of ChatGPT that everything has to be a large language model. And to Alex's point, the bigger, the better. The larger language models aren't always the best fit for discrete problems. Sometimes a smaller model is better. Smaller models will require less energy because they don't require as much information to train. And so, I think that there could be sort of a broader rethink of the need for large language models in every use case under the sun.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, just like, searching for the local pizza place. Yeah, do you really need like the most incredibly massively overpowered AI to, driving to the shops in a Ferrari, really? Do we really need to do that? I don't do it. Well, not every day anyway. So, Izzy, thank you very much for that. And I can imagine like Alex de Vries, playing this podcast back to see what we've done with him and thoroughly agreeing with that point about we need more data. It would certainly help him and other researchers kind of put out more research. That's what they do. All right, cool. Now, Izzy, I wonder what you're going to think about our wonderful listener comments. We do have a few here, and I love getting the listeners' voices into the podcast. And I must say, by the way, a big thank you to everybody who's downloading us. We're now up to 2,500 podcast downloads, and in fact, even that figure's a bit out of date now. It's maybe we're up to 3,000 or something, but things are rocking away quite well. I know you might think that doesn't sound like very much, but we've not been here for very long. And we're just getting this thing started from scratch. So we've gone from 0 to 2,500. It's not bad. But we want to keep that going, and we do want to keep hearing from you, dear listener. And in fact, on our Facebook group, so if you search, by the way, for SOEP Tech, SOAP Tech, on any of the social media, including Facebook, you'll get to our page over there. Gowrie in India has shared a video all about those I am not a robot buttons. Those ones, Issy, when you're going onto a site and you have to show that you're not a robot by clicking something. And I've always just wondered, well, hang on a minute, if all you've got to do is just tick a box, surely a robot can do that. So why how come they foil the robots? Anyway, there's a video that Gowrie's shared that explains how that works, and I'll say no more. It's just worth checking out on our Facebook page. And also, this is the other thing, and also this video does tell you why they why it's always that if you get through that part of it, then they show you a picture of some traffic lights or a motorbike. It's always motorbikes and traffic lights. Maybe they, confuse robots especially. I don't know, but it's all there on that video. Now, Matthew has a photo of a whole skip full of e-waste, and that's in response to an item we did a little while ago on e-waste, electronic waste. Matthew says, I took this snap at a metal recycler yard last week. I thought it would be useful one day. This was just one dumpster of many: computers, routers, servers, racks, NASs, etc. This centre, they pay for them and they know all about what it's worth and how much. And so, in my humble opinion, Matthew says the value depends a lot on the gold content in all those components. But it was quite heartening, actually, having seen so many photos of just a load of e-waste dumped into landfill, to see actually a recycling centre with a whole skip full of stuff where they're going to extract some value from it. It just made me feel good. I'm funny like that, you see. So that cheered me up. We have another Matthew. You don't need to be called Matthew to listen to this, but it helps. So other Matthew says, hello, I'm new to this group. I recently joined because I was a long-term listener to Digital Planet, Digital Planet. It's great to see the gang back together. Congratulations to you all on a really great start. Thank you, Matthew. And if you're a listener who's found us through other marketing, or you stumbled across us and you have no idea about our backstory, don't worry, you're not left out. We love you just as much as all the people who are frequent flyers who've been with us for a long time. But a long time ago, people on this team it wasn't that long ago, we're involved in a programme called Digital Planet on the BBC. Just so you get the reference, folks, but don't feel left out. We're all just one big happy family here. So welcome, welcome, welcome. Let's do a few others. Floyd says, I've just landed here. Thanks for letting me in. Long-term Digital Planet listener. I've been following it from BBC World Service to podcast, and now here we are. I'm an actress, writer, singer-songwriter, poet, mother, grandmother, and finally, not sure I'll have time to fit in any more careers, continues Floyd. I'm finally a podcast creator and producer. Oh, cool. It's good doing this, isn't it? Grateful for all the tech information and the entertainment value. Looking forward to many more years to take advantage of it. So nice to re-meet you, Floyd. Jennifer's a bit gutted we're not on the BBC anymore, but says, I did enjoy the interview with Nana Bafur on Soap. His backing of the podcast is much appreciated. This podcast is the next gen, and it's going to be interesting. Stefano, by the way, heard us talking about the Giga project to connect all schools to the internet by 2030. And I have to say, that was one of the programs we did where I came home and I thought that was a good day's work. I loved that program. So go back and listen to it if you can, if you've not heard it already. So Stefano says that was an awesome topic this week. It's an amazing project and such a large one. Thanks for bringing this to our attention. Really interesting. I doubt you'll be getting any voice memos from me, continues Stefano, because I hate the sound of my own voice. And I'll just pause there to say, dear listeners, I can hear you chuckling, Issy, about that. Isn't it funny how many people just hate the sound of their own voice?
Oh, absolutely. There must be some research on that out there, because I think it's pretty universal.
Oh, yeah. Do you know what? There is a science reason for it. What I might do is just keep everyone hanging, and I'll tell you next week, folks, why science says that we don't like the sound of our own voice. So there is a good reason for it. So you're onto something there, Issy. It's not just people, just being a bit weird about it. It's actually a thing, and it's quite normal for people to not like the sound of their own voice. And for what it's worth, folks, of course, given what I do, yes, I kind of can handle the sound of my own voice if I hear it played back, because you just have to get used to it in this kind of business. But what I will say is, if I hear my voice that's been recorded where I haven't perhaps expected it to be, so I don't know, maybe you're just setting up for a meeting and people just do a little test recording, and then at some point you hear it played back, and I just hear myself as I sound in the real world when I'm not, kind of being on a
radio
podcast
voice.
microphone. My radio voice, exactly. If I'm just doing my normal day-to-day voice, I hate it being played back. I just found it really, really painful. So, Stefano, I'm with that. I would advise you, Stefano, and anybody else who just thinks, I hate the sound of my own voice, just remember that you sound great to everybody else. Don't worry about it. Go through the pain barrier and leave us a voice memo. And you can say that you don't want us to play it. If you just make it absolutely clear you don't want it played on the podcast, we get it. But everyone out there, including you, Stefano, you've got a great voice. Don't worry about it. We want to hear about it. And I am available for motivational speaking. Just to finish off Stefano's message here, he says, I'm interested in all things AI, VR, internet, politics, all things tech. And our ChatGPT is going to be the next biggest thing since the App Store. And I mean, that's an interesting question in itself that Stefano raises there, Issy, about the extent to which AIs, I mean, we know that they are the next big thing, but, whether you're in the school of thought that says, no, I mean, literally AI, when we say is the big thing, it is transformational. It is actually going to really, really shape the next stage of the world. Or some who say, we need to slow down a little bit. And sure, AI is going to assist us in all kinds of ways, but let's not overplay its importance or even allow it to become too dominant. And it was those kind of conversations that split the board at OpenAI over the Matt Altman whole kind of thing as well. So it's a thought. Sam, I beg your pardon. Anya has reminded me. Sam, I think it's because we have so many Matthews listening. I just called. I'm just calling everyone Matt. Beg your pardon. Sam Alton, stand corrected here. What do I know? But anyway, it's been quite a big discussion over at OpenAI, and I don't know if we'll fully solve the AI will save the world or rule the world thing in a single podcast episode. But any thoughts gratefully received from you, Issy.
When Stefano says that ChatGPT is going to be the biggest thing since the App Store, I mean, I would say much bigger. The impact of, if we're just talking beyond ChatGPT, with the impact of generative AI is going to be, I think, immense, more so than we can even really imagine right now. And I think the division is among those who think that immense impact is going to be for better or worse, but not whether it's going to have an immense impact. That is sort of a given. And I think ChatGPT, generative AI is going to swallow the app store. We're not going to need our apps anymore because we're going to, put everything to to an AI assistant, and that AI assistant is going to use whatever technology it needs on the back end to give us an answer, so that maybe that supplants all of the apps that are in our phones, and there's just sort of one AI assistant to rule them all.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. It's a thought. And then when you think about all the environmental impact that we've just been discussing as well, that's enough to get you talking, dear listener, isn't it? So please do email us hello@somewhereonearth.co. On WhatsApp, we are code 44 7486 329 484. That's 44 7486 329 484. And go and program it into your phone. You won't have to then make a note of it every time I blab on about it in the podcast. Some people who've done just that include Gary, who says, testing, the WhatsApp, while listening and waiting for the Ukraine drone item. Oh, that was a good one. Did that a few weeks ago. Brendan's joined as well, and a few others. So nice to see you folks. And look, folks, I probably will at some point stop banging on about social media, but I'll just be honest. We're a podcast. We're just starting out. We want to grow the audience. We can only do that if we get shared, if we get liked, if we get reviewed, if you tell your friends about it, if you print the name of the podcast onto a t-shirt, just, fly around with some big banner off the back of an aeroplane, but do that safely and don't evade any FAA regulations. But anyway, the kind of things you mean. So basically, if you don't talk about us and engage with us, then for one thing, we can't have lovely little items one we've just had now, where we just heard some of your voices. But most of all, this podcast might not survive. And if it doesn't survive, it'll be your fault. So if you want that on your conscience, don't get in touch. There we are. Just saying. So Anya says, I've gone a bit over the top with that, but that's the lengths I'll go to build an audience, Anya. We're getting there. We'll do it. You and me and the audience and Issy. There you go. Should we do something else, Issy?
Sure, let's move on.
I think that's probably very wise. All right, because we're going to talk about how a browser add-on can make you money. And no, I don't mean in a gross, scammy kind of way. This is where you share your browser history, not with a load of exploitative tech companies, but a data cooperative where a load of you share the benefit of your data. The cooperative, or data union, if you like, shares the data with developers and other bodies who you choose. And the idea is really catching on. Now, it doesn't need to just be your browser data. This can be really any of the stuff that you generate, perhaps through your fitness app or your online banking. And now, from the start, I'm going to throw it out there. Like, why can't we all just see data as a resource for the wider social good without having to be obsessed with making money out of it all the time, whether we're an individual or a tech company? But I'll park that for now, and we will hopefully come back to that. But let's first go to this report from Shiroma Silva. She's been looking into data unions and speaking to some of the happy campers who've signed up.
It's a form of passive income. It required downloading an app and linking a bank account to it. And from that point on, it's been essentially no effort at all. So it's kind of a bit of a why not? To me, it seems like a complete easy win.
It's cool that I'm part of this community where I get a say in what's happening with how my data is used.
Where I'm from is Jamaica, and we aren't the most obvious when it comes to technology. Truthfully, even members who do IT have no clue of what data union are, and I believe we can all earn passively with it. So I think it's a great opportunity to many.
What's been talked about here are a type of data intermediary that are commonly known as data cooperatives or data unions. Now, when any of us browse the internet or use any sort of digital products, we're generating data that's bought and sold to third parties, often without our knowledge. Data unions, as we'll call them for the purposes of this piece, are run by trusted moderators who gather members' data and sell it on to selected buyers. And like any union, the more members who join, the greater the bargaining power of the union, or in this case, the greater the value of their aggregated data. Here's Chloe Diamond, Chief Operating Officer of one of the largest outfits called Swash, which collates the browsing data of its 350,000 members.
It's a way for people to be part of this community and this union idea where their interests are being protected by this broader umbrella organization.
Meanwhile, when members of Dublin-based unbanks connect their bank to the Unbanks app, they receive a cut when their data is bought by financial institutions. And as I began to learn, its origins, like many such startups, came about from idealistic intentions. Here's co-founder Alan MacDonald.
So the motivation to start Unbanks was really seeing how much value large companies were gaining from consumers' data. So you would have seen stuff like Cambridge Analytica, which I think maybe 5 or 6 years ago at this stage. That, along with all of the reports coming out about how the big social media companies were using our data and selling it and making massive profits, along with financial institutions doing the same. We believed this was fundamentally unfair, and we wanted to see if we could do something about it.
It's something that members such as James Gibbons is fully on board with.
In essence, it's an app that sits on my phone and I check it probably once a month or once every 6 weeks to see how many points I've accrued. And those points I can then sell for vouchers. So I just will occasionally get a lunch for free.
Whether it's a free lunch or a few $100s it's earned every month via discounts, points and tokens depends on the platform. But, as Javier Stewart says of his Swash tokens, there's optimism about future growth.
I think the value of the token will rise. So even for someone just holding the token, I think that over time it will increase and therefore it can be a substantial amount.
But it's not just the money. There's a sense of controlling what's yours, according to another user, Ailish Simpson.
There's a lot you can't control, especially like in this big sort of landscape where stuff online is so huge and so vast, but it's incredibly comforting to be able to control even a small part of my own existence in the digital space.
The way we see the future going with companies like Unbanks is you can decide, hey, I don't want my data sold to a fossil fuel company, or I don't want my data sold to fast fashion company. And you can opt in or opt out to these industries, and therefore you have more control over where your data is used and how it's sold.
Around the world, there are data intermediaries collecting information on all aspects of our life, from health information to telematic data generated by our vehicles. And whilst there's no accurate figure for how many exist, consumers are increasingly becoming aware of their data being traded. Now, the EU has just voted through the Data Governance Act that'll establish rules about the use of generated data. Here's Dr. Moshed Manan from the European University Institute, who has researched the governance of data cooperatives.
It provides a little bit of rudimentary framework in which these data cooperatives can operate. By setting out conditions for reusing and accessing data, it also sets a number of requirements that a data cooperative as well as other data intermediation services have to abide by.
But what are the challenges facing these new ventures?
In some cases, whether we're talking about a data union or a data cooperative, there is a concern about having sufficient scale to be able to either collectively negotiate or bargain, or to be able to even create, let's say, something new out of the collective data that is pulled together. So as a consequence of this, we almost have a little bit of a chicken and an egg problem, that you need to have one very successful example of a data union or data cooperative that already exists for then there to be more adoption of these particular data intermediaries.
Others, such as Professor Han-Lin Lee at the University of Texas in Austin, who studied data and monetization, are concerned about a possible widening of the gap between the haves and the have-nots.
Because the people who produce more data tend to be online more, and we already know the people who spend more time online, they tend to be more educated, have higher income. So I think the income disparity is another concern.
On the whole, though, there's great promise. Just about everyone agrees on that, and Han-Lin Lee feels they could be particularly empowering for people who generate unique data, such as creative workers involved in the training of text-image AI models.
These type of models, they heavily rely on creative workers' content. So I do think if creative workers can establish their own data union and then governing that, the aggregate data sets they produce, I do think there's potential for creative workers to make a meaningful income from that, compared with me just selling my browser history.
Meanwhile, today's early adopters are excited about the future.
To be at the forefront of that, helping the technology forward and essentially innovating is very exciting as a person who does a normal job and to work, comes home and gets to have that level of excitement within the community.
If you click your fingers and you wake up in 10 or 15 years' time, the data landscape in terms of personal data, consumer data, is going to be vastly different. And it's going to move in this direction where every individual will have agency.
As individuals that are not the likes of Elon Musk setting the road for how these things will evolve, that being aware that the general public actually have some say, I think is very important. And regulation can have a good impact on that, but I think technology is the best way forward when these are technological advancements, and we need to be able to keep up with them quickly and be ahead of that curve as it's happening, as opposed to playing catch up with a lot of bureaucracy afterwards.
A data union user ending that report there from Shiroma Silva. And as I said, going into that report, I know that one of the objections to the data union approach is this obsession with monetizing absolutely everything. And perhaps people should say, yeah, sure, I'm happy for my data to go into things like clinical trials, for instance, or other ways of achieving social good. And I don't really need to make money out of it. I just get a nice feeling that my data's doing something to help wider society. Why should I want to cash in on it? Some people might say, and in fact, there is a browser add-on that has this kind of data for good function where you can donate the proceeds of your data to charity if you want. So in some of the bigger data unions and approaches, you can actually use this. You can harness this idea of getting a little bit of data for good. But Issy, where do you stand on this? What did you make of hearing those voices and that piece about data unions?
Well, to your point about why can't we just share our data for social good, I think you have a point when it comes to clinical trials, when it comes to more privacy protective areas of data collection, right? Like when you give your information over to various types of medical institutions or the government, there are certain protections you have in place. When you give your information over to tech companies, there are no protections, maybe even the opposite of protections. There is a near guarantee that your data will be shared and exploited and sold, and just the profit is going to be maximized on your data. And so in those circumstances, I think it's valid for people to want to be able to, sort of cash in on some of that. But there's obviously there's no mechanism, even these data unions, that is going to allow consumers to, make as much on their data as a company ever would. And so the mismatch will always be there.
Yeah, sure. And it's, I suppose, useful at this point to give a sense of how user-friendly these data unions are. And, so I had a go at installing a browser add-on that has this kind of data union function. And, it was fairly easy. It just bolted onto my browser. Having said that, it took a little bit of setting up, and quite a few bits of terminology came up as I was installing it and, just trying to configure it that I didn't fully understand. And then it gave me the choice of about 8 different wallets. And I thought, I don't really have any of those. I've just got a wallet in my pocket, so I'm being a bit playful here. But I think one point I might respectfully make is that you need, I'd say, a little bit of tech savvy for now if you're an early adopter, but obviously it'll get much easier to use these things as we go along. I don't know if I'm being a bit harsh there, Issy, but that was just my thought. Anyway.
No, I think that's a really valid point. I mean, we have to remember the level of digital literacy that people have, right? A very large number of people are, just struggling to even access the internet, let alone understand how their data is being stored and shared and swapped and sold, let alone understanding what defenses they might be able to build around that or how they might be able to make money off of it, right? That's why these sort of interventions that put the onus on, you know, the average consumer to protect their own privacy or to, you know, make money on their own data are never going to be enough. The onus really needs to be on the companies that are collecting this data and amassing this data, and that really has to come from, you know, some set of privacy regulations, which you all well, I guess there's GDPR in Europe. We have nothing like that here in the United States, and it has been a very slow-moving train to ever try to get those privacy protections in place.
Yeah, no, sure. And, you know, certainly, you know, it occurred to me as I was going along and trying to work out how this is going to make me rich. You know, I'm going to sell all my data. This is going to be amazing. And it occurred to it dawned on me pretty quickly that you don't make a whole lot out of this unless you really are prepared to, for instance, accept every single ad, basically to start re-accepting all the things that you've blocked from your browser. If you say, yeah, I'm going to have all that, I'm going to answer all the surveys, I'm doing this, then you might make a bit. But it seemed to me from, you know, privacy protecting search, you don't make a whole lot. And I suppose that's the whole point, because you're not sharing any data at all. So who knew? You're not going to make any money from data sharing. So it's almost like, if you like, this seemingly, you know, socially worthy idea of data unions, it does mean undoing some of the stuff that you might have been doing as a citizen to protect yourself. And that might be a challenge for some.
Right. It raises a question about how much you really are willing to give up to say you kind of stuck it to the man and got something out of it.
Yeah, exactly. And people will make their own choices. And of course, others would say, yeah, it's all very well for that guy on his fancy podcast to go on about, well, why should you want to make money out of it? Shouldn't it be for the social good? Maybe that's the kind of thing that middle class people with reasonable incomes might say because they can afford it. Other people out there might say, no, actually, there's a cost of living crisis. We could do with every single dollar and cent we can get our hands on. And actually, this would be very useful for us. So it's a thought. But the way of the future, do you think we're going to hear more of this kind of idea, that this will kind of permeate further into the mainstream, the idea that our data is something we should consider increasingly to be ours and that we should have more control of them, perhaps has been the case so far?
Yes, I do think there is a movement in that direction, but I hope the movement is toward pushing regulators to ensure that there are restraints on the companies that are collecting these data, and not so much of a push to say that consumers should, you know, sort of have to take certain steps to maximize the value of their data or to protect it in the first place.
All right, there you go. I think we'll leave it there. Issy, thank you very much indeed. Issy
Thank you.
Lepowski, I think we've got you back on in a few weeks because, of course, you are one of my regular presenters' friends. So I look forward to the next time already, and I hope you have a great day from here. Thank you, dear listener, as well, for being with us. Of course, we did a big plug for the social media earlier on, so I won't bang on about it too much again, other than just to say we are on other platforms, and you can find us through SOAP Tech, SOEP Tech. Our audio team today, let's do the credits. Our audio team today are Keziah Wenham Kenyon and Stevie Arnoldi here at Lanson's Team Fana. Our production manager is Liz Tui, and our editor is Anya Literovich, and it doesn't matter who I am. See you next time, folks. Take care.